Hey everybody, welcome to the March 5th edition of the Emerald City Hockey Podcast. I'm Dylan. I'm here with RJ. Today we're going to talk some of this week's Kraken news, along with some general around the league news. We're going to focus on one of the players from our most recent scouting spotlight, as far as who the Kraken might be taking in the expansion draft, and then we're going to have an interesting debate about whether or not Patrick Kane is or is not the greatest American hockey player of all time. Whether or not he's reached that level yet. But let's start at the beginning with this week's Kraken news. RJ, what was happening?
All right, well, we'll start with my favorite piece of recent Kraken news. The Kraken are stepping in to try and save University of Alaska Anchorage hockey program. The university put the program on the chopping block recently, amid a bunch of COVID-related cuts, but there is still trying to save it. If the program can raise $3 million by August 30th, they can stay alive for at least another season. Now, the Kraken have stepped in and donated $150,000 towards that goal, and they've encouraged fans who can to donate. They've re-upped the donate page a lot of times on their Twitter, all their social media feeds, and they're really making an effort to get fans involved to try and save the program. Now, I love this. The Kraken don't just see Alaska as technically their TV territory, the way some other teams view other states that are out of their market. They really embraced the role of being Alaska's team, which I think is really smart. Alaska is an underrated hockey market. You had the ECHL's Aces for a long time. At the collegiate level, you have the UAA Seawolves, who they're trying to save, and the Alaska Fairbanks Nanooks. There's a lot of hockey, especially youth hockey, going on in the state. And I think it's a wise move for the Kraken to really embrace that and try and become Alaska's team. I don't think you've seen a team really do that before, and they're in a unique position to do that.
Yeah, I mean, it is a really unique situation. So, just to, I guess, simplify this for people if they don't know, when any sports team really, when they're a professional sports team, when it comes to their TV rights, as far as where their games are going to be broadcast, they all have specific regions divvied up. And when they divvied up the Seattle Kraken's TV region, Alaska was included in that. So Seattle kind of has the unofficial NHL rights to the state of Alaska. And of course, complicating things is the fact that Alaska is not attached to the rest of the
Right.
continental United States. So it makes for an interesting situation. But yes, I too am really happy that the Kraken are taking this interest in this program, because I do think that it's an important thing. I think, you and I both know that a lot of great players have come out of Alaska. Alaska has
Mm.
a very healthy hockey culture, and so I do think that it's a good thing that they're stepping in to try to help save this program, because I think the program is has done a lot to keep keep Alaska in everyone's thoughts when it comes to
Right.
hockey and stuff, because they are so far away from everything. So yeah, I'm really happy that they're doing this, and I'm hopeful that they're able to reach the goal.
And I like the creativity that they're thinking with, and it kind of shows, the Kraken organization's mindset. This is, a unique opportunity that arose because of COVID, and they should be stepping in here, and that's great. But I like that they're, thinking creatively in other terms too. I mean, like, how about this idea? The Kraken CEO, Todd Lewicki, he said the other day, as part of that press release for the trying to save the hockey program, he said, "I'd love to see the UAF Nanooks play the Seawolves in our building."
Yeah.
The idea, he said, yeah, the idea of hosting that, in our brand new arena, it's cool.
Hmm.
So, I mean, I'd love to see that. That's a great way to get them involved. And first you got to save the Seawolves program, but I think that'd be really cool to see.
Yeah, no, I think that would be fantastic. I think it would go a long way of to not just keeping them in everyone's thoughts, but also generating a lot of fans. Right? It's not like
Right.
University of Washington. It's not like Washington State. None of those programs have D1 hockey the way
Mm-hmm.
um, Anchorage does. So I think it would it would help. Yeah, they'd get a lot of fans out of it, and I think people in Seattle would get excited about it. It's a college hockey team that they could call theirs,
Oh, absolutely.
even if they're not always there. But I think it'd also help probably that team too if they could come down and play a
Yeah,
couple
and I'm
games in
sure they
Seattle. It'll help with
can.
travel, not just for them, but also other teams, which is something to consider coming out of this kind of COVID um, era, we'll call it, or year, even though it's now stretching into two. Um, is a lot of these programs, right? Obviously this program's running into financial problems. It might not exist at all. I got to think a lot of programs might not have the financial resources to be able to go all the way up to Alaska to play, but they might be able to stretch it out to Seattle. So um,
Right.
I'm
It could
really
be a help.
interested to yeah, so I'm really interested to see if they could make that happen. um,
Yeah.
we'll include a link down in the description to
Right.
all that stuff if anyone wants to go check it out or donate or anything. um, And then the Kraken had another piece of news this week. Why don't you tell us
Yes.
about that?
The Kraken have a radio home, 950 KJR Seattle Sports Radio. Everett Fitzhugh will be doing play-by-play. And I'm excited to listen to Everett calling games. The Kraken have done a good job putting him kind of front and center in a lot of their team media. And, I think we've all kind of gotten to know him a little bit at this point. And, I'm really looking forward to seeing him do his thing on the radio. We've yet to have an announcement on who's going to do color commentary, either with him or with John Forsland on TV. But that's something to look forward to as well.
Yeah, and it's important to note that this is also the radio home for the Sounders and for
Mm-hmm.
the UW Huskies. So it's nice they're joining a nice established Seattle
Right,
sports um, you know radio station. Like they know the area, they know sports, they know how passionate the fans of Seattle are, and it should be really good. Um,
yep.
yeah, it's exciting. That's that's it for Kraken news. That's actually a lot of Kraken news considering where we are right now.
Right. Sometimes you'll get some really slow news weeks and not much new with the team. But yeah, no, been some good news dropping recently.
Yes, so let's move into kind of some of the news stories of the week from the NHL. First, I'll real quick mention that yesterday we lost Walter Gretzky, who's of course Wayne Gretzky's father. He was, you could really argue he's given us one of the greatest gifts in all of hockey, right? In his
Right.
son Wayne, and I don't think that his kind of influence on the game can be understated because not just did he give us Wayne, but he gave us Wayne's attitude towards the game and his way of
Right.
playing the game, and he was a really good role model to parents of any kid that plays sports. Right? He was
Right.
passionate about the game. He taught his children the fundamentals. He pushed them when they needed to be pushed, but he wasn't like a helicopter parent. He wasn't bugging coaches for ice time. Granted, you don't exactly
Right.
need to when your kid's Wayne Gretzky, but but he was there. He was always supportive of his sons and daughters, and he gave us the greatest lesson any hockey player can learn, which is go where the puck is going, not where it's been, and
Right.
that one line really fundamentally changed how hockey was played, because Wayne fundamentally changed how hockey was played. Uh, when Wayne came in, it changed to a more skill based game. It changed to a more intellectual style of game, and a lot of that can be traced back to Walter Gretzky. So, uh, thoughts to the whole Gretzky family. He passed away yesterday. He was 82. Just wanted to mention that. That news came out late yesterday, but it wasn't the last bit of news to come out
No, it
yesterday,
wasn't.
as out here on the West Coast, it was like what 10 o'clock last night that we got news that
Yep.
Calgary had fired their coach and had brought back Darryl Sutter, just
Oh, people.
totally out of nowhere. Obviously Darryl Sutter is one of the first people I think of when I think of Alberta and Alberta hockey, but
Oh, absolutely.
I sure didn't see this coming at all.
No, I don't think anyone really did. Yeah, they felt they were at a point where the best option was to go drive up and pull him off the cattle farm in Viking, Alberta, and bring him in to coach the team. Yeah, I mean, talk about a news dump. Also, with
Yeah.
with the Gretzky news and all the hockey games gone,
Mhm.
done for the night. 10 o'clock, you're announcing you fired Jeff Ward and you're bringing in Darryl Sutter, and then about half an hour later, it coming out that he's not just here to finish the season. He signed a 3-year contract.
Yeah, no, no, they want him
He's
to
here to
really,
stay.
yeah, no, they want him to steer the ship for a while. Um, I obviously Calgary has been in, well, I guess all growing up, Calgary has always been in this kind of in between land for me.
Yeah,
Just watching hockey through the 2000s and through the 2010s and now into the 2020s, where Calgary has always been this borderline playoff team. They're never bad enough to be picking at the top of the draft and getting a superstar that they can build around, but they're never really in there competing for cups.
mm-hmm.
And once again Calgary has kind of found themselves in that situation, and this year especially with the shortened season, with the fact that it's the best chance a Canadian team has had of winning a cup in a really long time, just given the way the league has structured things this year due to COVID.
You can
um,
sidestep the good American teams.
yeah, and so I get why Calgary wanted to make a change.
Mm-hmm.
um, and as I said, they've never really been a what I would consider a legitimate cup contender, at least not in a long time. But the last time they were, it was in '04 when they lost to the Lightning in the finals. And who was the coach of Calgary then? It was
Darryl
Darryl
Sutter.
Sutter. So, I got no problem with them kind of going back to someone who's worked for them in the past, as far as making them competitive, having success with the team. But yeah, I mean it's an interesting hire. Excited for those press conferences though.
Oh, absolutely. Those post game pressers where he doesn't look like he knows what the heck is going on. The one word answers. Yeah, no, I'm definitely looking forward to that, and I'm excited to have him in the division. I
Yeah.
think you know, assuming that the Flames kind of take to his coaching style, it's going to be an interesting contrast between them and how I imagine the Kraken are going to play.
Hmm. Yeah.
You're going to see some different styles of hockey for sure.
Yeah. I mean, how do you think that Calgary's going to take to his style? Because I don't look at this Flames team and think of it as the kind of prototypical Daryl Sutter
No,
roster.
definitely not. I mean, aside from Milan Lucic, who I now assume is going to be playing 20 minutes a night, um, I I don't know how they're going to take to his style. I mean, how is Johnny Gaudreau going to play in a Daryl Sutter team? I mean, we know what his style is like. Go hit someone, and if you're still getting outplayed, go hit some more. Do you think he tries to maybe adapt to the newer game? I don't even know if he knows the meaning of that word, but are the Flames just a trap team now, and the players are going to have to adjust?
I don't know. I think he will adjust. I think really what they're bringing him in for is for his I guess we'll call it like the motivation he brings to the teams he coaches,
Right.
that effort level that they bring, of
Mhm.
even if they aren't the most skilled, they're going to go out there and they're going to find a way to beat you, and usually that is through out checking you and outworking you and dumping pucks in to the offensive zone and then going in and making sure they hit you uh,
Mhm.
in the corner and then and regain possession. And you know it's not like he hasn't had success with that, right? I mean, this is a
True. Yeah.
guy, he
Wherever
won
he's
two.
gone, he's had success.
Yeah, yeah. So he's coached 24 seasons, and only three of those 24 seasons he had a sub 500 record. There's not a lot of coaches in any
No.
sport that can say that. And so, obviously he won the two cups with LA. I just I look at this Flames team, and this is something that we've talked about a little bit before. I don't know that this is the core that they can win with. I
Right.
feel like the core of Sean Monahan and Johnny Gaudreau and Sam Bennett, and I don't think that they are. They're certainly they seem built differently than kind of the rest of the team is built.
Mhm.
When you have like obviously a Matthew Kachuk, right? Like he
Right.
seems like he's going to do great in a
Oh,
Sutter
absolutely.
system. I
Or
have
even a
to
Miguel
imagine.
Backlund.
Yeah, exactly. Backlund should be fantastic. Just about everybody on their blue line should be happy about this news. Um,
Yep.
I am interested to see how like Noah Hannafin adapts to
Right.
this. He's the only one that kind of seems like style of play wise might be the odd man out. But
And Shillington.
yeah, but
Shillington for sure.
yes, but I think I think it's going to be interesting. But I've thought that they kind of need a shake up with that core anyway. Last week you and I were talking, and I mentioned they might be a sneaky contender for Jack Eichel with some sort of
Right.
trade where you could literally move Monahan and maybe even also Gaudreau out to get a Eichel, and I think even Eichel would do well in a Sutter based system. He's a big guy, he's physical, um, but yeah, I don't know if this is their way of kind of signaling that things may be changing in the not so distant future come this off season. They might, obviously this year it's hard because you can't really trade with an American team this deep into the season because you're going to have to wait 14 days for them to um, join the team. But I think they're going to use the rest of this year to kind of see who takes to Sutter's style, who takes to his intensity, and who I think ups their level of play, but really their effort level to see who they want to keep moving forward.
Right. I think big changes could be coming in the offseason to the roster. And, they've clearly identified, the style of game they want to play and who they want leading it, from a coaching perspective. Um, yeah, I think they're going to make some moves. And I'm interested to see, how involved, Brad Treliving is, and what the GM's role is, and how much input Sutter has on the roster. I mean, you remember
Mm-hmm.
in his last stint with Calgary, he was the coach and GM simultaneously for a while.
Yeah.
Well, I don't think that's going to happen again. It'd be fair to think that he's going to have some roster input as well.
Yeah, I mean, really, what we should be doing is we should be sad that in just this, but we were off by like a year or two, missing a team having both Brian Burke and Darryl Sutter.
Yeah,
The combined press conference opportunities of those two guys would have been just absolutely phenomenal.
oh, absolutely. Yeah, and with like Matthew Kachuk and his antics on the team too, and Lucci.
Yes,
Oh,
it would have been. Oh, that would have been really something special. Real quick, I think let's jump over and talk about the other Alberta team because the Oilers this week played a three-game series against Toronto. They lost all three games. They lost by a combined score of I think 13-1 over the three games. Um, and this is coming off of last week when it was Battle of Alberta and the Oilers really, you know, they looked unstoppable against the Flames last week. You had McDavid, he was coming off a 5 point game going into this series, and just absolutely nothing from the Oilers in really any facet of the game whatsoever. So I guess I want to pose this question to you because one of the things I noticed while watching all three of these games is, McDavid had like a non-existent presence. Like if I was specifically looking for him, I was waiting for him to turn it on. He never could. And a lot of that was just because Toronto limited his ability to enter the zone with speed. And
exactly.
and so my question to you is, does McDavid need to adjust his game to kind of take it to that next level, or is it just he's going to have these kind of dead spots when teams really have to focus on him and play him a certain way, or does he need to find kind of a different approach for when that stuff happens, or do you think this was just like three unlucky games?
I mean, there when you have players that have that kind of speed, when you get really aggressive, on them as they're building up the speed, and you kind of pinch early and you get bodies on them early, it does slow them down. And there are ways you can adjust to that. Game plan wise, you can kind of dump more pucks in. Don't look for all those controlled entries necessarily. And I think the Oilers didn't do a good enough job of making those adjustments.
Mm-hmm.
You also have to look at, you're playing against a very good Leafs team that's on a roll right now, and I think they felt a little more pressured to try and stop the Oilers' offense, early before they could get into the Leafs zone. And I think part of that was driven by the fact that their goalies kept getting injured, and they had second, third string goalies in there.
Yeah.
I've seen teams have that little extra motivation to to prevent those high quality chances getting to their goalie when it's someone in there besides their starter. And I think I could see that kind of energy and desperation from the Leafs in those games. But I mean, they've hit on a good strategy to slow down a player like that, and I saw it. I was watching the Sharks Avalanche, the first of their two games, where the Sharks won 6-2 over that Avs team, and you wouldn't think that would be the result of that matchup. But one thing that they were consistent about doing with Nathan MacKinnon is, before he could build up any speed in his own zone, either send a defenseman in to pinch down, or have a forward who is up high come in and just, even if you nudge him just a little bit, even if he gets by you, it stops him from building up that speed. And I think we've seen that that's really effective countering players that use their speed like that.
Yeah, it'll be interesting. Edmonton should make the playoffs this year, so we'll see if because obviously that's when it's going to matter, and that's when teams are really going to look at that and play McDavid that way, and we'll see if by then he's got an answer for it or not. I think though that this series really proved that there is a significant difference between Toronto and Edmonton, just as far as having a complete team. Toronto right now can roll 4 solid forward lines. I don't want to say that they've got 3 solid defensive pairings, but they've been doing a good job kind of this year with that 7 D-man rotation.
Right.
And their goaltending this series proved that they got depth there. So whereas as Edmonton really, they, outside of McDavid, Draisaitl, they're lacking a lot of depth. They still don't have a defenseman not named Darnell Nurse, right? He's still like the only guy there. Goaltending's still a problem. So we'll see. They got even more work to do, as they seemingly always do come the off season.
That's always been their story. Just when they think, okay, we're for real now, they run into a reality check and realize they still have a ways to go.
Yeah. All right, so let's now move into our scouting spotlight for the week. This week it's Jake Bean, a defenseman from the Carolina Hurricanes. Why don't you give us a real quick kind of explain who he is and why you think he's going to be a member of the Seattle Kraken come next season?
All right, so with Jake Bean, I mean, when you look at him, you've got to think of the Golden Knights situation with Shea Theodore. The Ducks 2017, they're in win now mode. They're just coming off a conference final appearance. They have a stacked blue line. You've got Cam Fowler, Hampus Lindholm, you got Manson, Vatanen, and then of course they had BX on the no move clause, who they had to protect. So you're in win now mode, and you have this stacked blue line that you want to keep intact. So looking at those guys, you're going to have one of Manson, Vatanen, someone exposed. I don't think the Ducks were willing to do that. Now, Shea Theodore was exempt, but he'd only played 53 NHL games to that point. Now, he was a first-round pick, talented prospect. He's got the upside. But they ultimately make the decision that it was the best idea to keep the sure thing because you're trying to win a cup now. And I think you can look at that parallel with the Hurricanes. I mean, the Hurricanes are in that kind of situation. They're in win now mode, and they have one of the most stacked blue lines, in the history of the cap era. You've got Slavin, Pesce, Shea, Gardner. You got Dougie Hamilton if you re-sign him. He's an upcoming UFA, but then you got to worry about him if he re-signs. You got Hayden Fleury, and then you've got Jake Bean. and you can only protect 3 of those guys. And ultimately, you have to make a decision. Do you want to lose an established top 4 defenseman off of your roster while you're trying to compete right now, or do you want to lose a prospect who has higher upside than all of them? And it's a difficult decision. Now, as players, the comparison between Theodore and Bean it holds true. There's a lot of parallels. They're both point per game offensive defensemen in the WHL. Both first round picks, and they've both kept up that scoring in the AHL. And they were kept out of the NHL for a while because their teams were so stacked on the blue line.
Yeah.
Now, on the ice, now the things I see in common on the ice are vision from the point,
Mm-hmm.
and that ability to make passes from the half wall when he pinches in. Like Jake Bean, and Theodore's the same way. He's got this ability to find guys in the slot, almost like a center, when he's coming down along the boards, to see that open guy. And in his first few games this season, you saw him doing that, and that's how he got his first couple NHL points.
Yeah.
Now, of course, my perspective is more from a roster building standpoint, with the expansion draft and how that's going to play out. But as a former scout, what do you notice about Jake Bean? What do you see on the ice?
Yeah, so I like the Shea Theodore comp. I'm a huge Shea Theodore fan, just for anyone. I thought the Ducks were crazy for letting him go. I would have exposed Vatanen instead. But I think I don't know that we should be comparing Jake Bean to Shea Theodore yet. Like, I don't know that he can come to Seattle and have the same kind of impact that Theodore's had in Vegas, and that's for kind of 2 reasons that I see him in his game. The first being his skating. Shea Theodore has amazing skating ability. He can evade checks like no one else. He can find little windows and squeeze himself through. He can accelerate exceptionally fast. Jake Bean is not as smooth of a skater. He's not as fluid. When he doesn't skate back as fast as maybe you would like a defenseman to. So a lot of times when I watch him, he'll get kind of caught up. If anyone's coming with speed into the zone, he kind of gets stuck in this middle ground where he's got to be transitioning and crossing over to shift to be joining them and skating forward towards his own net, and that's not really something you ever want your defenseman doing. Especially if in Seattle he's going to be having to play in a division with a Connor McDavid, let's say, right?
Right.
So kind of just when he's in his own zone, his skating ability is where I have concerns for him. He skates with a little bit of like his hair is on fire kind of thing, where he does a lot of choppy strides. He'll do a bunch fast, quick, choppy strides instead of something nice and fluid where he's using crossovers to maintain or even build speed as he's having to maneuver around his own net and stuff. So that's the first thing that kind of keeps me from wanting to totally be like, yeah, he's going to be, the Kraken's Shea Theodore. The second is I think he relies on his wrist shot way too much for a defenseman. And he's had a ton of success with it, and I will say it's one of the hardest looking wrist shots I've ever seen, and he can place it perfectly. But if this is going to be a guy that's going to be quarterbacking a Kraken power play, I want someone who can take that bomb from the point that's going to be low to the ground, low to the ice, I should say, and is going to be, it's going to create a rebound when it hits a goalie's pad, or it's going to be tippable, right? A lot of times when you see Jake Bean, especially on the power play, he'll kind of skate lower into the slot, and then he's looking to take a wrist shot, and he wants to go top shelf with it. And he was able to do that in junior in Calgary. Right. He was able to do that in Charlotte with the Checkers. It should be noted that he did win AHL Defenseman of the Year last year, so he is good. I'm not saying that he's bad by any stretch, but he hasn't had a lot of success with that yet in the NHL because it's not as easy to do to just walk into the slot and let go of a wrister, right? If everyone could do that, scoring would be like it was in the 80s, right? So it also creates opportunities for the team going the other way. because he's coming in really low into the offensive zone. Especially Carolina, they play kind of an umbrella style power play. So all of a sudden now you have three guys down by the face-off dots and you have no one back. So I've seen a couple times where other teams have gotten some good rushes, shorthanded rushes because of that. So those are kind of the two things that I noticed watching him that give me a little bit of pause as far as his ability to come in and be a top pairing guy or the power play quarterback for the Kraken. But but yeah, I mean, his vision is there. That's totally there. His passing ability is there. He's not a bad defender. It's not like he's totally offensive minded. But yeah, that's just kind of the stuff I see when I watch him.
Right, and I see what you mean on the skating. I mean, there's definitely some stuff that can be worked on there. As far as efficiency of the stride. And, yeah, I'm interested to see kind of going forward how that works out for him in his own zone. Right now he's been playing kind of third pairing minutes. He
Mm-hmm.
hasn't been getting a whole lot of challenge as far as facing top players of the opposition, which is a luxury the Hurricanes have, that they can shelter him like that. But I wonder if, as the season goes on, they maybe either give him some more minutes, give him some tougher minutes to see, whether he can handle, facing top opposition. Because ultimately, at the end of the day, the Hurricanes are going to have to figure out what they have in him, in order to make the best expansion draft decision. I think they know what they have in guys like a Brady Shea or a Jake Gardiner, but they have to figure this out too. And as far as the wrist shot, I don't have as much of a problem with that. I think you've seen guys who've been successfully able to quarterback power plays and do what they do in the offensive zone, using almost exclusively wrist shots. Brent Burns comes to mind. He doesn't really use a slap shot at all, and he lets go a whole bunch of wrist shots from the point. I mean, he shoots more than anyone besides Ovechkin.
Yeah.
So I think if you have a skilled enough wrist shot, it's not necessarily a problem. And I would put Bean in that category. But, as we've seen with Brent Burns, it can lead to chances going back the other way when you try and step into the slot too much. So as a younger player, he has to be mindful of that. But I think that's something you can work with.
Yeah, and like I said, that's part of why it becomes an issue is strictly based on the power play that Carolina is trying to run.
Exactly.
Right? If the Kraken decide to run something different, we still don't know who the Kraken are going to have as a coach, so I can't speak as to, any sort of history. But if they're going to run something different, where he's going to be playing off the wall a little bit more, that wrist shot, I like the angles for it a lot better there than having to really walk deep into the slot to be able to get something good off. So yeah, the wrist shot thing might not be as big a problem, or might not look as big a problem in Seattle. I do think that, yeah, I mean, I think they're going to start playing him more. At some point, someone's going to get hurt, right? Like they talked about this when they brought him up to the roster this year, was not only obviously he won AHL Defenseman of the Year last year, he's good, he deserves the opportunity, even though there isn't really an opportunity. But they knew that, it's a short and condensed season. You're playing more back-to-backs than you normally do. The odds of injuries, or even just guys needing a break every so often, needing a night off or two. So yeah, they haven't had to deal with any of that stuff yet, and I'm not wishing it on anybody, but I do think that we're going to start seeing more ice time from him as we move forward.
And the schedule's ramping up for everyone. I think it's getting more condensed for everyone, especially the Hurricanes, who had they did have to miss some games early on. It has, hasn't been as rough a season schedule wise as it will be for them. So I think you're right. We're going to see more of him. So make sure, Kraken fans, keep an eye on him. We're really going to see what he can do in the NHL.
Yep. We'll keep watching him, as well as everybody else that you've been doing a great job highlighting with your weekly scouting spotlight articles on EmeraldCityHockey.com. So everybody make sure to go check that out. Of course, link to the website down in the description. So now let's move on to kind of the fun debate topic we have this week, which is earlier this week, Patrick Kane scored his 400th NHL goal, and I was thinking about it, and I was looking at his career numbers, and I was thinking about all the other great American players, and it kind of hit me that I think Patrick Kane is the greatest American NHL player we've seen. And I know you don't agree with that, but um, let me just kind of quickly talk about why I believe that.
Let
Um,
me let me quickly say, let's enjoy this debate now while we can, because in 10 years we're all going to agree it's Austin Matthews.
yes, yes, I agree with that. I mean, if his trajectory continues the way it's been so far in his career, it will definitely be Austin Matthews, and Patrick Kane might not even be top three if Eichel continues that way. I'm not a huge Hughes fan. Um, I don't think he's as like I think people wanted to hype him up for his draft class just because, but
Right.
um, as far as Patrick Kane goes, when I was thinking about the other great American players, they were the ones that come to mind, and I know the one you think is Brett Hull, but Brett Hull was a lot more one-dimensional as a player. He was a goal scorer, right? That's what he did, and he did it absolutely phenomenally. But Patrick Kane is really one of the few guys that I think you can label a true playmaker, right? He's able to pass just about anywhere he wants to. He sees the ice fantastically. He can find the open man. He always knows where they are, as well as being, for this day and age, I won't say an elite goal scorer, but to have someone who can consistently be putting up 30 goals in this kind of modern NHL is pretty darn impressive. So, he's seventh all time in points amongst American players, but his points per game rank him up there, top five. His goals per game isn't quite as high, but like I said, you're comparing him to people like Brett Hull who played just in a different era where goal scoring was just higher across the board. And then I think finally, I'll just kind of conclude with this for my introductory argument. He won three Stanley Cups. That can't be denied. And it wasn't like, oh, he was on a team that won three Stanley Cups. He was he was a big part of them winning three Stanley Cups. So no other American player can really say that they were that instrumental in a dynasty the way he can. So with that, I'll turn it over to you, and you can tell me how wrong I am.
Well, thank you. So with Brett Hull, I mean, you touched on the biggest difference between Brett Hull and Patrick Kane. Brett Hull is a goal scorer, and Patrick Kane's a playmaker. And those are different skill sets, and it's not to take away from what either player does. There's no argument to be had. Patrick Kane is a better playmaker. Brett Hull's a better goal scorer. We know that, and it pretty much evens out as far as points per game over a career. Brett Hull 1.09, Patrick Kane 1.06.
Mm-hmm.
But I think the goal score element, the goals are harder to come by. When you talk about how many players can kind of do what each of them does. Brett Hull's fourth on the all-time NHL goals list. It's harder to find a player who can score at that rate. And I know you mentioned the different eras that they played in, and that has to be taken into account. But I don't think that actually swings things in Kane's direction. If you remember Brett Hull, he did catch some years, in the late 80s, early 90s where scoring was high. But the bulk of his career, and especially the bulk of his prime, was in the dead puck era of the 90s, where you had leading scorers, in the 80s and 90s point range. So looking, at that, and, goal scoring went back up post-lockout and, the start of Kane's career. So you have Hull, who played in an era where there was higher scoring and a lot where there's lower scoring, and numbers-wise, it actually evens out just about. So I don't think the era thing, swings things in Kane's direction really. As far as resumes, they both, awards, they both have one Hart Trophy. That's a wash. Brett Hull won two Stanley Cups. I know, you can make the argument 2 versus 3. Don't want this to turn to like a Kings fan versus Blackhawks fan argument type thing about the significance of 2 cups versus 3. But Brett Hull was still very instrumental to his team on both of those Stanley Cups. Especially with Dallas. And you look at the teams that he was playing, he was often the best player on that team. And of course, Kane was certainly instrumental in the Blackhawks Stanley Cups, but he had Jonathan Toews to play with. He had Patrick Sharp. There were a lot of good supporting pieces on that team. Keith and Seabrook on the blue line. Where I almost think that's a wash. As far as international competition, they both got silver medals at the Olympics, losing to Canada. A lot of parallels there.
It's the great American tradition.
Yes, oh, absolutely. But hey, Brett Hull won a World Cup back when the World Cup meant something. So,
well, I'm sure
for what that's worth.
Yeah, I wouldn't say much. I'll say this: for one, I find it interesting because normally when it comes to arguments about playmakers versus goal scorers, certainly in recent memory, we've been on opposite sides of this. Usually I'm arguing in favor of the pure goal scorer because that's the objective of the game, is to score goals. And if you got a guy who can do it as often as Brett Hull, then yeah, you should go with them. They're the better player. But I just think that I'm going to use one of your other arguments against you, which is you're big on the importance of a center over a wing and how much more instrumental they are into a team's success. Patrick Kane has played center some in his career. He can do it. And
he's played center.
Yeah. I think Patrick Kane is a far more I don't want to say dynamic per se, but he's more of a piece that you can plug and play in different places. He's more versatile. That's the word I was looking for. He could play, power play. You could literally move him to any position basically on a power play, and he would be successful, and your team would be successful. And I just think that there's a handful of people that you can say that about, and I think that kind of versatility and that kind of playmaking ability, when you're talking about it with someone on his level, where yes, we talked about the fantastic supporting cast he had during those 3 cups. You can't really say that these days, and yet here he is. He's still a point per game guy. He still looks fantastic every time he's out there. Jonathan Toews is a shell of his former self when it comes to his offensive abilities. So it's not like he's helping him out. Yes, he's got Alex DeBrincat, but it's still only Alex DeBrincat, right? Right. And Patrick Kane is still out here. I mean, I think he's one of the few guys that for a 50-game stretch in a season could be an assist-a-game guy, right? And I think that when you're talking about someone of that level and that playmaking ability, I just think that that versatility kind of pushes them above someone who's more of a one-trick pony.
Right, and I mean he does have more versatility in the line than Hull, and I think if you're talking about roster construction or things like that with the team, there's an argument to be made for Kane. But as far as, kind of impact on his team over the course of a career, I think Brett Hull has the edge. And, and part of that is, I think it's very impressive what Patrick Kane is doing right now, especially with as little of a supporting cast as he has, with Toews falling off the way he has. And I'll admit the story isn't fully written on Kane. He's still got a lot of career left. He's 32, and if he keeps this kind of thing up for a while, then he could certainly put himself in a good spot in that conversation when compared to Brett Hull. But I don't know that he's done it yet. Brett Hull is look, when he was 39, he was almost a point per game a season.
Yeah.
So we'll see where Patrick Kane is in 7. If he's still doing this in 7 years, then I'll admit for sure, he's, the best American-born player. But I don't know that he's going to be able to do that. So part of it, I guess it's not really a totally fair battle yet because Brett Hull's had those extra years and he performed well in them. But I don't think Kane's done enough to merit that yet.
Yeah, I mean, that's totally fair. I think when it comes to greatest player debates or greatest positional debates or any of that kind of stuff, I think I think those are the few times where it's important to keep counting stats in perspective, and kind of just look at the player's ability to play the game, right?
Right.
And I would choose, like you said, even if you're constructing a roster, I want someone like Patrick Kane, right? I'm going to choose him every time because of what he can do and what he can bring to a team, and that kind of highlight ability he has in every aspect of the game, not just scoring goals. But
Mm-hmm.
but yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, we'll see as the rest of his career plays out. I don't foresee a fourth Stanley Cup in his near or immediate future, but you know, who's to say what happens down the line? Um,
Yeah.
and yes, I think we can both agree though that Patrick Kane is the greatest American-born NHL player,
Yes. I think we can. American born. Yes.
just
Brett,
because that excludes Brett Hull. But
yep. Canada, but he chose to be an American. That's important.
that
He,
is
he
important.
team. He chose to be American.
Yes. Real quick, I'll just mention Mike Modano because I think he deserves to be in the conversation, if only because I think he did a lot to promote USA hockey.
Yes. If
More
you're looking
so more so than either of these other guys.
right, right,
And
for sure. I think he did a lot. Especially off the ice.
mhm,
That helped grow the game in the United States, where to a level where it wouldn't be today without him.
yeah, I think of those late '90s, early 2000s. Mike Modano was the face of USA Hockey. He was the
Yep.
one on the cover of things. He was the one making cameos in the Mighty Ducks. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? Like so. Just want to mention him real quick. But let us know, what do you guys think? Is Patrick Kane the greatest American player in NHL history, or is it Brett Hull? And also weigh in. Do you think a pure goal scorer is more important when they're at this level? Is it more important than a playmaker? And do you think counting stats should be kind of 50% plus of an argument, or less than that when it comes to some of these guys, right? you know it's always, we use counting stats, but then for select people, mainly Mario Lemieux, we kind of throw them out the window. We go, well, he didn't play enough to have the counting stats. So but you just watch him and he's one of the greatest of all time, right? I'm not in any way comparing Patrick Kane to
So make
to
sure we get that.
Mario. So yeah, I'll just want to disclose that real quick. Um, but I think that's it. You have anything else?
Yep. I think that's it.
All right. So thanks everybody for joining us. We'll be posting these podcasts every week, every Friday. So make sure to subscribe to the channel so that you get to see them. Make sure to click the bell icon so you can be notified when we post them. You can listen maybe on your commute home from work or whatever. That's where you like to watch YouTube videos, right? It's in the car. Don't watch YouTube videos and drive. Uh, shouldn't have to say that, but I will. Um,
Leave a disclaimer below. It's
yes. uh, all right. So I guess that's it. We'll see you guys all next week.
Yep.